The Uroboros files in Resident Evil 5 describe a virus designed not to destroy, but to refine. Its purpose, correct humanity's first genetic sin. A cosmic evolution virus born from the progenitor's flawed code, Wesker sought to purge the arrogance that corrupted life itself. What if his 30-year descent into madness was not a power grab, but a sacrificial act? Wesker sought to purge the arrogance that corrupted life itself, not human hands. The files whisper of a cure, not a weapon, a reckoning. Wesker's final confession cracks the code. Genetic arrogance, the original sin. Uroboros, not a weapon, but a culling, a forced evolution. The progenitor's mistake was humanity itself. He sought to unravel the virus curse, stitch the wound with fire. A twisted redemption, erase the flawed, birth the worthy. What if his 30 years were a penance, not a conquest? The files scream of a species too proud to survive. A reckoning, not a reign. Did he seek to save or to atone for saving? The world's end was his altar. Who decides which genes deserve eternity? In 1968, the progenitor virus first seeped into Arclay's soil. Umbrella's ambition curdled into obsession. By 1998, their labs spanned continents each for ethics. Raccoon City's fall was not an end but a reckoning. Fire rained from skies as Wesker watched, a specter in the ash. What does a god do when his creation spits back? He buries the blueprint. Uroboros was no weapon, it was a scalpel. A blade to carve out humanity's original sin, progenitor's corruption. Wesker's 30 years were a single prayer, to undo the virus that birthed monsters from men. Yet redemption demands sacrifice. He offered cities as ash, bodies as clay. Did he seek to mend or to erase? The virus that made us gods also made us insects. To break the cycle, he needed a clean slate, a second Genesis. But the price of atonement is paid in blood, and Wesker's hands were already stained. Raccoon's ghosts whisper of a man who saw God in the double helix. Who tried to rewrite the fall, who failed. Uroboros was not a cure, it was a funeral, for a species that couldn't stop digging in its own tomb. The truth carves deeper than a blade. Uroboros was not a weapon, it was a scalpel. G-Virus and progenitor's blueprint fused not to destroy, but to *edit*. Wesker's obsession wasn't conquest, it was correction. A purge for the arrogance that birthed the progenitor's first transgression. He did not seek to end humanity. He sought to unmake it. The culling began with evolution. Merge the old god's template with the new, the G-Virus raw hunger with progenitor's perfection. Let the weed out the weak, let the survivors become something other, not monsters, not gods, something in between, a species unchained from its genetic shackles, a second Genesis. Why? Because humanity's sin was not in dying, it was in rewriting itself. The progenitor was a Mysticia virus given too much power. Wesker's Uroboros was the counterstroke. A forced ascension, a final test, would they adapt or perish? The answer was never uncertain. The records show only chaos, you see a tyrant's failure. But the data tells another story. Every outbreak, every mutation was a stage in the pruning. The virus did not spread randomly. It selected The G-Virus chaos pitted against progenitor's order, a war in every cell. Only the worthy would endure. What kind of savior builds a plague to play executioner? Wesker did. His redemption was a funeral pyre, for a species that could not stop burning itself. His redemption was a funeral pyre, for a species that could not stop burning itself. He didn't escape the mansion that night, he redefined it. A vial of progenitor derivative met his vein, not a serum, a gambit. Rage, not reason, drove the needle. The virus that birthed horrors would birth his second life. Later, Uroboros coiled in shadows, not a weapon, a verdict. Humanity had twisted progenitor into a god of hubris. Wesker would unmake it. Every spore, every strain, every failed experiment was a brick in his pyre. He called it redemption. The world called it madness, but madness is a mirror. It reflects what the unprepared cannot see. Wesker's rage was primordial, a correction for crimes against nature's code. He watched civilizations build on progenitor's corpse. Knew they'd never learn. Uroboros was the scythe, the reset, a forced return to the template before corruption. No triumph, no dominion. Just a final, vengeful equation. What if the original sin wasn't Eve's apple, but the moment humanity claimed it could improve on Eden, the virus didn't evolve him. It purified him. a blade honed on decades of failure. And still the question gnaws, when the architect of hell declares the house complete, who dares call it a catastrophe? The world called it a weapon, a mistake, a catastrophe, but what if the scalpel was never meant to bleed the patient dry? Wesker's hands did not tremble when he fused G-Virus to Progenitor's blueprint. Nohai's grip was steady, purposeful, a surgeon's. The Progenitor had birthed humanity with reckless hands, stitching life from flawed code. Uroboros was the counter-stitch, a slow unraveling of that error. You think him mad. Then look again at the design. G-Virus chaos, yes, but bound by Progenitor's original template, not to destroy but to rewind, to prune the rot before it consumed the tree. The so-called weapon was a scaffold, a framework to collapse humanity's broken scaffolding, a guided collapse, a mercy. The architect's final blueprint was never fire and brimstone. It was a scalpel at the throat of hubris. And still the question gnaws, when the builder calls the structure unsalvageable, who dares name the ruins a failure? Wesker's confession lies buried in the DNA of every infected cell, not a curse, a correction. Uroboros wasn't a weapon, it was a sacrament last breath for a species drowning in hubris. Progenitor's mistake, too little change. Wesker's thesis, evolution wasn't choice but reckoning. A debt humanity owed, a price due. What if his 30 years were one desperate prayer, not to destroy but to unmake the mistake? To let the virus finish what it started. The progenitor virus was never a gift, it was a wound, a primal scream etched into DNA. Wesker saw eater rot at the core of creation. He called it the original sin, not the taint of pathogens, not the chaos of zombies, the arrogance, the hubris of a species that dared to play God. His notes burned with it. Asterisk evolution is not a path, it is a debt. Asterisk Uroboros was the repayment. A serpent eating its own spine to remind humanity, you were never meant to ascend. They called him mad, they called him villain, but the truth gnaws. The virus did not seek to conquer, it sought to unmake, to unravel the threads of a tapestry woven by hands too clumsy to hold the loom. Wesker's final act was its sacrifice, or surrender. His body crumbled, his plan collapsed, yet the virus lingered, a ghost in the code, a whisper in the ruins. Did he know, as the world burned, did he know he was not the executioner but the penitent, that Uroboros was not a weapon but a prayer? A twisted redemption for the crime of progenitor's first breath. The files end there. No victory, no triumph, only a mannowing before the thing he unleashed. A redemption carved from ash, from failure, from the cold math of a universe that refuses to be fixed. And in the silence the question hangs, was Wesker's curse the virus, or the knowledge that even perfection is a cage? The lab hums with a sterile, ozone-tinged cold. Flickering monitors cast blue shadows over Wesker's face as he injects Uroboros. His breath fogs in the sub-zero Ira ritual, not a rebellion. In his vision, the progenitor's template glows like a serpent swallowing its tail. Golden strands of DNA coil merge with the G-virus black rot, a symphony of failure and hope. He activates the sequence. The facility shudders. Heat floods his veins, a furnace purging decades of genetic hubris. For a moment, he is both patient and surgeon. The virus sings in his blood, a requiem for mankind's first sin. His body fractures, spines bloom through skin. Below, the Andes wind howls, carrying the stench of Spencer's forgotten labs. A final irony, the man who killed him left the cure incomplete. Wesker's last thought is not of power, it is of his brother's face, warped by the same disease he sought to bury. Redemption has no shape. Only the weight of a key tossed into an abyss. The world does not change. Spencer's shadows stretch longer. And in the silence, the question festers. Was the sin the reaching, or the belief that perfection could ever be earned? The cold lab reeked of ozone and failure. Wesker's breath hung in the air, white and transient. He traced the virus path through history, a scar across time. The progenitor's birth in 1968 was a bell, tolling mankind's hubris. Flickering fluorescent lights bathed Arclay's vault in a sickly blue. A vial clinked against steel. Asterisk sin asterisk, he thought. Asterisk is not the mutation, it's the refusal to kneel before it. Asterisk. Uroboros was no weapon, it was a reckoning. In the chamber's heart, machinery groaned like a dying beast. Wesker's shadow stretched across walls etched with equation seach, a requiem. Had seen the future, cities blooming with new flesh, old sins calcified in the ash. But evolution demands a midwife and a blade. 30 years, one vial at a time. The first test subject screamed for 12 hours. Wesker let them burn. Asterisk redemption asterisk. He realized asterisk is not a choice. It's a tide that drowns the sinner and the saved asterisk. The air thickened with static. A single drop of Uroboros hissed on the floor, eating the concrete. Did he weep? The records don't say, but the vial in his hand trembled, not from fear, from the weight of a species' last prayer. The world ended not with a bang, but a gasp-end Albert Wesker was the altar where the offering bled. What did the virus know as it climbed the ladder of its own making? Umbrella's progenitor was never a tool. It was a flawed god, a chain reaction of hubris. They sought dominion over life, but life is not a script. The progenitor was the original wound. A virus with too many masters, each iteration a betrayal, each mutation a scream. Wesker didn't weaponize evolution, he became its midwife. Uroboros was no apocalypse. It was the reckoning, a spiral of code meant to collapse the progenitor's corruption, to burn away the rot, but fire never knows where to stop. Albert Wesker's confession was etched in his spine. He was not the architect of hell, he was the executioner of a species too proud to kneel. The cure required the patient's death. Umbrella's sin was not in creating the virus, it was in believing they could hold its leash. Every lab, every trial was a child's game with a deity's toy. Evolution is not a ladder, it is a storm. Wesker let the storm in. Not to rule, but to remind humanity who had never ruled anything. The progenitor was the mistake, Uroboros was the correction. What good is a soul if it cannot suffer? What good is a god if it cannot bleed? Wesker's Uroboros was the world's first true prayer, silent, viral, and absolute. The altar is still warm, the offering is still blading. The screen hums, pale blue light seeping through cracks in the lab's sterile walls. A single drop of blood evaporates on the Uroboros file's surface, leaving a ring like a fossil of failure. Wesker's breath fogs the glass partition cold, clinical, final. He traced these symbols once, fingers trembling not with fear but anticipation. The virus glows faintly, a dying star trapped in vials, its hum harmonizing with the lab's fraying circuits. Somewhere a siren wails, it sounds like a psalm. The file's words etch themselves into the concrete, asterisk cosmic design asterisk. Wesker's shadow stretches, sharp-angled and gaunt, across floor tiles stained with old experiments. He remembers the progenitor's first scream, human or creator. The question curdles in his throat. This was never about power, only correction. A ledger balanced with sin and serum. The air grows thick, sweet with antiseptic and rot. A monitor flickers, replaying footage of a child's hand reaching through barbed wire flesh against futility. Wesker's reflection in the glass blurs. For a moment, he is not a god but a gambler, all in on a hand he cannot see. The Uroboros files whisper, or perhaps the lab does, as if the earth itself mourns the weight of its own design. The temperature drops. Frost clings to the virus's containment seals. A final line materializes on screen, glowing like a wound. Asterisk humanity's evolution must be guided by cosmic design. Asterisk the camera tilts upward, past shattered skylights, toward a sky still indifferent. The altar remains, the offering is still waiting. The cosmos does not forgive, it recalculates. What if Umbrella's original sin was not the progenitor's creation but its first act of defiance? Alex Wesker's labs did not inherit Spencer's ambition, they buried his error. For 30 years Albert's dream coiled. Uroboros was no weapon, it was a scalpel. A purge of humanity's genetic hubris. The virus sought not to conquer, but to unmake the arrogance that birthed it. The progenitor's mistake was not the infection, it was the belief that mortals could play gods. Wesker's confession, a twisted absolution. His final act merging with the very cure he'd perfected.